So it was a very hot day, even hotter than this, in August of 1994. And I was on vacation with my family down in Disney World. And as we commonly did, we had gone to the parks in the morning. But our kids, Henry was 3 years old at the time, and Muriel was 8 months old at the time. And so you can't stay at the parks very long, especially after they get crowded. And so our practice was to go to the parks in the morning and then find something else to do, either sit around the pool. Of course, you didn't get to sit around much when you have a 3-year-old, but go to the pool, or maybe find something to do in a nice cool shopping area, or go to a movie. And on this day, we decided to go to a movie. And we ended up seeing The Lion King in August of 1994, soon after it opened. And we had pretty high hopes about the movie, going to see it, because we were already big Disney fans. And we had seen on a previous trip to Disney World a show based on The Lion King. In the Magic Kingdom, there was one of the areas just next to the big carousel at the middle of the Magic Kingdom, as a matter of fact. There was a big marquee above one of their rides, and it said, "The Lion King, an animated show based on the Disney classic." But this was 6 months before the movie opened. So they were calling it a Disney classic before it even opened. So we figured, you know, they had to be pretty confident in this. It had to be pretty good. So we were pretty excited when we went to see the movie. And indeed, we got into the theater, and as I mentioned, it was very hot. And it probably didn't take, you know, here we were, real excited for Henry at 3 years old to see the movie. We had older cousins of Henry, my nieces and nephews, with us also. We were pretty excited about them all seeing the movie. And about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes into the show, as is predictable, Henry fell asleep. And he fell asleep. This theater had these chairs, not the kind of super recliners that they have out at Oak Brook now, but they had these chairs that at least leaned back quite a bit. And so Henry fell asleep, laying flat out, and Henry was a big kid too. So this was not particularly comfortable. But Henry fell asleep laying flat out on my stomach as I was leaning back in this chair as far as possible. And then this movie begins to unfold. And what I learned is that it is primarily a story about a father and a son, Mufasa and Simba, and their relationship, and Mufasa's task, his job, his calling, to teach Simba what it means to grow up to be the king that he needs to be, so that the community in the Pride Lands can benefit from his leadership. And so here I am. I don't know if it was the heat or what, but I'm sitting there like bawling throughout The Lion King because of this father and son relationship. And me, maybe, I don't know, not for the first time, but certainly in a new way, realizing just what kind of responsibility I had as a father to this child laying there on my stomach. And it was, as the movie says, the responsibility to help him remember who you are. One of the great climatic scenes in the movie, or one of the great pathos-filled scenes in the movie, remember who you are. Because Simba has rejected his responsibility to care for the Pride Lands as the king, and Mufasa, who has died, appears to him in a sort of like dream-like sequence, you could call it, and Mufasa says, "Simba, remember who you are." And so several years later, 2007, I think it was, I went on to a conference in New York City and ended up buying one of those last-minute, same-day, like $10 tickets to see The Lion King on Broadway, the stage show. And it was absolutely unbelievable. How many of you have seen The Lion King on Broadway or elsewhere? Oh, good, lots of you. If you haven't, you know, I don't do many commercial plugs, but it's still showing. So if you get a chance, go see it. It's really quite incredible. And the reason it is incredible is because it's this incredibly powerful, instance of storytelling, where the music and the visuals and the movement that go along with it all just build and parallel the storyline. So this story just comes across so powerfully and so beautifully. But it was interesting because in 2007, when I saw the stage show, really the same thing didn't hit me about the movie, or about the storyline, as it did when I saw the movie 13 years earlier. Because this time, just a different stage of my life, I guess, the theme of it that really struck me was its reflection on responsibility, on what it means to be responsible for something, responsible to something, responsible with something in your life. You know, the magic of this story really lies in the way it connects with human experience, with the human condition in general. And I think that is one of the things that we all experience. The responsibilities that we have in life, whatever they may be, to family and to community, to our nation in some ways, to our church, hopefully you feel, and then ultimately, of course, to our God. And that is where I can tie in to the scripture reading that Lauren read earlier. Paul was writing to the church in Ephesus, and he said, "Lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called." It's an amazing line. Lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called. Every single one of us, because of who we have chosen to be as followers of Jesus Christ, have a responsibility to lead a life worthy of the calling to which we have been called. The calling to which Simba had been called was, of course, to grow up and become a king. For a time, as I mentioned, he rejected that responsibility. He was overcome, believing that he had killed his own father, or at least was responsible for the death of his own father, and overcome by grief and guilt, and then manipulated by his evil uncle Scar. He left the Pride Lands for years, presumably, and denied his calling, the responsibility that he had to the Pride Lands. And of course, when he leaves, Scar takes over and the soil is destroyed, the water is poisoned, the plants all die, the prey on which the lions depend in this great circle of life have all fled. The prey has all fled, and so the lions have nothing to eat. And so the circle of life has been broken. Not understanding his job as king as a responsibility, but rather as an opportunity to dominate others, Scar turned the circle of life into a triangle. It was a triangle with him at the top and all things serving only him all the way down to the bottom of the triangle. It was a hierarchical structure meant to serve only him. It results, of course, in disaster for the world, for the community, for the family, and ultimately for his own psyche and the psyche of so many others as well. And I got to thinking, we might think our calling, our responsibility is not as great as Simba's. Simba is called to be king of the Pride Lands. He is the king of beasts. There's that great line in the movie where Pumbaa and Timon are talking. Pumbaa says, "What's eating him?" And Timon says, "Nothing. He's at the top of the food chain." Right? Great. But we may think that we don't have such responsibilities in life. But listen to this line from the letter of 1 Peter. Speaking of us as people of God, it says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light." Do you hear the responsibility embedded in that line? It says that we are a royal priesthood. We are royalty. We are kings and queens, and we have such responsibility in the world. And then there is the three words that really are the key to this. It says, why are we called as kings and queens? A royal priesthood in this world? In order that. Not to benefit ourselves, but in order that we might make God's love known in the world. You are kings and queens called by God to make God's love known in the world. That is your place in this great circle of life. We have conceived this whole Broadway series, and we haven't been too blatant about it, but we conceived of this whole Broadway in the Bible series as a way to talk about privilege, as a way to become more aware of our place in the world. Privilege is one of the key themes and an obvious theme in Hamilton. It's, of course, one of the key themes in Ragtime that we've looked at. And, in a way, it is in Lion King as well, because we are forced to recognize our place in the circle of life. I mean, look at me, right? I am a white, male, cisgender, heterosexual, religiously dominant American. I mean, you can't get more privileged than that. Okay, it's not my fault. I didn't choose to be any of those things, but it's who I am. I'm not to be blamed for it unless I don't recognize where that puts me in the circle of life, with a responsibility to everyone else in that circle to make this world more like Jesus wants it to be. Privilege isn't bad in and of itself. It's bad when we don't recognize what it is and take our place as the people that God has called us to be, to spread God's love to all. Once in a while, we might have to use words to do that, but mostly it's in the actions of our lives. So, my friends, this is indeed a great circle of life that we live in. Our little animals, friends, are here today. I noticed, by the way, that nobody brought a cat. Pictures. Okay, we got cat pictures. That's good. Until we got a cat about 5 years ago, I was not a fan of cats. I am a fan now. I adore them as well. And so I apologize for the dominance of the dogs today, but I know that cats are wonderful parts of God's creation as well. All God's critters got a place in the garden. But we recognize, as we acknowledge our relationship with our animals, that is one part of the circle of life, and that we are all called to recognize our place in that circle of life. Kings and queens, a royal priesthood, meant to take our place and share God's love with all the world in all we do. So let us take that calling, that responsibility seriously every day of our lives. Be the people God called you to be, and remember who you are. Amen.